Today we're going to be discussing the Fifth Commandment. Let's go ahead and jump right into it and see what that's all about.
Mm.
Let's do it.
We're going to start in Exodus 20, verse 12. It says, "Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you." And while we're at it, let's go ahead and skip over to Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 16. It says, "Honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God commanded you, that your days may be long, and that it may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you." So this is those moments, they've come out of Egypt, the Israelites have come out of Egypt. The Father's given them commandments, if you're going to be my people, this is what you need to do. And I don't think that there's a Christian out there that would say that we're not supposed to keep this commandment, right?
Hopefully.
So let's dive into this a little bit, guys, and see if there's any sway or any changes or anything like that that's going to happen throughout the Bible. What are you guys' initial thoughts?
Well, I'll say I know when we look at those verses, one, it's interesting to see that lumped in of love God and have no idols, keep the Sabbath day. Okay, cool. We deal with God. Now take honor your parents. That's the first thing that's after you've done dealing with me and who I am, you better go honor your parents because I think as regular just everyday humans, we have to learn about authority and structure. And if we don't recognize that all of creation is about authority and structure, there's God, then there's Yeshua, then there's angels, and everything has its proper place and its proper structure. And so he's like, hey, once you learn how to deal with me, the second layer of structure is going to be your parents. So
Mm,
then you have to take care of that correctly. And I love that it's right up there at the beginning. And it doesn't just say obey no matter what. It says honor. And honor's definitely a different kind of word than just, submit wholly in every category for every reason. It's no, they're there, and whether they're good or whether they're not so good, whether they give you good advice or bad advice, we're still supposed to honor them because of who they are and because they brought you into the world. There had to be one dude and one lady who got together at one time to make another human come out. And so, and just from that alone, we are thankful for our life and for who we've become. But I love that, throughout that commandment, it's definitely like that conditional type statement. Do this so that you can have this. He's like,
hmm
now, if you don't go and honor your parents and you're acting a little bit unruly, one, the Bible talks about stoning the unruly child. We don't have any reference of that ever happening, but, it was an option apparently. So it was like, here's the extreme negative, and then this honor stuff, here's the extreme positive. You're going to live a long life. You're going to have blessings. It may go well with you. So who would read that and go, nah, pass. I'd rather have a hard time. I'd rather everything be difficult. I'd rather get into the new land and it'd be a bad day. So I love that it's listed where it's at in scripture and that it's detailed in the way it is. It's before all the you shall nots. It's got some more information for us, and God's always going to give us information where it's needed.
Yeah, I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, and what I'd like to also say is there's a connection here between the way we treat our parents and the way we honor them and the way we honor our heavenly Father.
Hmm.
So when we just did don't take the Lord's name in vain. And so that's important because we're taking his name upon us. And so our actions, the things that we do is an example. It's for everyone's looking at you going,
Hmm.
okay, you say this, does it line up with what you say?
Mm,
And with our parents, is how important is that for us to honor mom and dad? Because I believe that if you are a highly spirited child or a young person or however old you are and you have parents, the way that you treat your parents, there's no way that you're loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind if you're treating your parents like trash.
mm,
It's just it doesn't equate. It doesn't work out that way. It's like when Yeshua said the two greatest commandments, of course, the first one was to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. The second was your neighbor as yourself. And it's like, and there's no way, and I know why he paired those two because you cannot have hate for your neighbor or your brother or whoever it is. You can't have hate in there and also say, "Well, I love God with all my heart, soul, and mind."
Hmm.
It just doesn't. It doesn't really work out that way. I know there's a lot of different circumstances out there. Everyone comes from a different household. A lot of broken households out there, and I get that, and we'll address that a little bit later about that. But here's the deal. Um, They both go hand in hand, and I believe that's why that's in there right after, honoring your parents. We have the Sabbath, and you're honoring the father and that, and then we go into honoring the parents. There's a connection between our earthly parents and our heavenly dad.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And then the other point that's interesting there is just like when we talk about honoring our parents, our mother and our father, right? It's male and female, but it's they're your parents until, and then there's a dot dot dot, and it's till one of you die. You're there if they're 99 and you're 82, fill in the blank, whatever the number is, that's still your parents, and we're still called to honor them. And I love that there's not a expiration date. Honor them till you're 18. Honor them till you get your own house. No, honor them because they're your parents.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you guys brought up the other commandments as well, because we're told the greatest commandment: love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And then there's a second, love your neighbor as yourself. And the second's like the first. And well, how do you do that? How do you love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength? You keep the first four commandments. And then there's further breakdown in scripture of how to do those more specifically, right?
Mhm.
And then I love this that once we're getting into the part that the next six commandments is how to love your neighbor as yourself, right? And I love that it's starting off with your parents, because that's where everything starts, is
Mhm.
in the home. I love that. I think it speaks a lot to the heart of the Father and what He's showing us, in how to walk according to His ways. I think it's just amazing. So
Mhm.
um, I am going to want to dive into this word honor a little bit later on, but
Mhm. Kyle, are you gonna dive into the Hebrew part of that word at all?
um, do you have any good stuff for us?
I do.
Well, then I will let you do that part. How about that?
Okay, sounds good.
All right. But I do want to dive into that word honor,
Mhm.
and maybe a few other things too. But before we jump into that, let's go ahead and look at some other examples of where we can find instruction on this. Jonathan, you got some for us?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely would be remiss to skip out on this chunk of scripture, and it is a chunk, but it's in Luke chapter 2, starting in verse 41. Now, this is about the early Yeshua days. So let's just go ahead and read it. Verse 41 says, "Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of Passover, and when he was 12 years old, he went up according to custom. And when the feast was ended, as they were returning, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. His parents did not know it, but supposing him to be in the group, they went a day's journey. But then they began to search for him among their relatives and acquaintances. And when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem searching for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. And when his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, 'Son, why have you treated us so? Behold, your father and I have been searching for you in great distress.' And he said to them, 'Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?' And they did not understand the saying that he spoke to them. And he went down with them and came down to Nazareth and was submissive to them. And his mother treasured up all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature, in favor with God and man." So yeah, that was a chunk. But what was important to kind of get in there is, one, we're getting a big story of who Yeshua was as a kid.
Hmm.
Because it's important to understand he wasn't just the kid skipping rocks and shooting off bottle rockets. He was at the Passover the whole time. That's all 7+ days of this, right? They were there. They were there in advance to make sure they were good to go. They stayed for the time of unleavened bread, and then they left. So he's about his Bible and his feast days. And he was, at an early age, it was like, so as was the custom. It wasn't even a surprise. But all that being said, the family gets to leave. And one, he has to be a pretty trustworthy kid where they're not like, hey, somebody touch Yeshua on the shoulder and make sure he's standing next to you on the way out the door. They're like, hey, man, he's with the kids or he's with one of the family members. It's fine. He's always doing what he's supposed to do. And what's interesting is he was still doing what he was supposed to do, but not according to their mentality, not according to their understanding. So they come back and they meet with him and they're like, "Hey, buddy, hey, little dude, you're 12. What's going on
Yeah.
here? This is not how these things play out." And they kind of gave him the stern, like, you've had us looking around like crazy. You've caused us all these issues.
Young man.
This is your fault. This is your problem. And he says, well, if you would have known I'm about my father's business. And they're like, well, they don't, what are you talking about? Like, I'm your dad. Like, what? And so, they're starting to get an early understanding of this isn't just Jesus. They're remembering what the angel told them. They're remembering, that's right, this is the son of promise. This is the Messiah. Okay, so this is their early indicator. This is Yeshua's early, like, I'm not departing from you, but I'm showing who I am as an early man. But all this, he says, my parents asked me to do something. He said he was submissive. He said, yes, ma'am, yes, sir. And he said they didn't hear another issue from him. He didn't deviate from the plan ever again. That was his parents. He says, I honor you guys, one, because it's in the word, and two, if I'm going to be the perfect Messiah, I'm not allowed to sin. I'm not allowed to break trust. I'm not allowed to break confidence. So did he do the wrong thing? Only if they told him not to, and then he would have gone out of his way.
Right.
They had not given him an instruction not to do it, so he didn't even sin in this moment. He just opened the door for a different liberty. But it's just that, love that story where he's the Messiah. He could do whatever he wants. That's how people always say, oh, he's Jesus. He can do whatever he wants. But in this moment, he says, no, I do what my parents say. And even though I could be here schooling these rabbis, schooling these Pharisees, handling my business like a grown-up, I'm a kid, and those are my parents, and God told me to honor them. And so there's a reason that they need me to be with them, and I'm not going to second guess or ask questions. The answer is yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And I just love that as an example. This isn't some random kid. This is the Messiah. And he's like, remember, follow me, because I'm the one to follow. So that's just a great story for us to like really dig into.
There's so much in this too, guys. I love it, and we could go down so many rabbit trails in this. It's unreal. But there's some people that have this idea that Yeshua or Jesus, could have been just your typical kid. He was maybe unruly and throwing rocks, like you said, or whatever. And I do believe that he was, a kid. He was a child at one time. He probably did childlike things, right? But that doesn't mean that he ever sinned, and that's kind of the idea that some people have, that it wasn't until he became an adult that he lived this righteous life, that he was just your typical kid before then. But that's not what we see. We see that, yes, he was a typical child doing child things until he became of age to know, hey, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be about my Father's business. And there's various stages in a child's life that they go through where they learn various things. So I don't know. I think this is really awesome, but it also goes to show how easy it is. His mother had direct communication, informing her about who this child was going to become. And I don't know if it's so much she forgot, or if it was more of a, okay, this is something we got to worry about much later in life.
Right.
Not really thinking about the developmental stages of becoming that man that he has to become. Right. So, maybe that's a lesson for us parents as well, to remember that, we are training up our children in his ways. Right.
Yep.
So anyway, I love that. Good stuff.
Yeah, I could. If what I would love is to see that script written in today's vernacular, because she would have shows us, Yeshua, you scared me to death. Where were you? We were looking all over Jerusalem for you. Because I almost died giving birth to you. Look what you did to your mother. Look what you did.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah, there you go.
He's like, Mom, leave me alone. I'm doing God's work.
I'm studying he's doing a Napoleon Dynamite. He's like, I'm studying the Torah. Oh.
Lord have mercy. Okay.
Hey, this is about honoring your parents. So we're going to be a little bit kiddish or a little bit childish today. So
I see what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
What else we got, boys?
Yeah, so one of the other verses that really stood out, it's in a smaller chunk here, but it's in Ephesians chapter 6, and we're going to start in verse 1. It says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. And it goes on to say, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in discipline and instruction of the Lord. So in that, there's definitely a two-sided conversation. it's very important. God's not saying, "Hey, kids, go and honor these people who are just the worst, that have nothing for you, that are just against you. They're violent. Fill in the blank if you guys know, and you probably have your own personal experiences of heard something of not so bueno parents." And when you have to deal with that, that makes it all the much harder. And that's why that I think this comes in and it kind of has a follow up. Paul's like, I'm a little bit smarter than you guys. Hey, kids, honor your parents, but dads, boy, if you mess with these kids,
Yeah.
so whenever I tell you, you better not provoke them. If anything, you raise them up in discipline, and you raise them up in scriptures, and you raise them up in the way they should go, and they should be able to audit your life. Hey, Dad, didn't the Bible say that you're not supposed to do that? And you're supposed to
Right.
say, hey, you know what? You got me. I know I'm your dad, and it's all about respect, but I mess up too. And like have that heart to heart moment. Hey, kid, I'm sorry. This is me getting better. I'm still a sinful man. And guess what? When you're an adult, you might be in the same shoes, but learn the lessons while you can. And I think that's the portion of that where it's saying honor them. And it goes on to just to make sure, like, in those parentheses, this is the first command with a promise. They were like, this is like a guarantee. There's not a lot of stuff in life that's a guarantee. They're like, hey, if you buy this kind of car, it's super reliable, still might break down. Hey, invest in this thing because it's going to make you rich. It still might not work. But the Bible's like, this is a guarantee. Honor your father and mother. It will go well with you. This is a commandment with a promise attached to it. So why don't you take this moment and go have a couple mirror checks and say, am I honoring my father and my mother? And dad, you better not mess this up because your son or daughter's trying to honor you. If you go in there and ruin the experience for them, that's going to be on you.
Mm.
What I love about this as well is the father has an incentive program built into his commandment.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with children, if you promise children, hey, if you're good today, then we're gonna go get ice cream, or if you all make straight A's, we're all going to Universal for our family vacation. Like this incentive that you're giving. So I love the fact that the father knows he's dealing with young people, young brains. He's like, hey, let me give you an incentive here. You like living for a long time?
You like living.
You
Yeah.
like living?
Brought you into this world. I can take you out.
I'll take you out, man. Really? Yeah. Look, I grew up with a dad that we had a shotgun in the corner, and I heard that more than one time from him. He's like, "See that over there, son? I brought you in. I'll take you out." But I digress. But I love the fact that father has an incentive program put in there for this,
Mm.
and it's just like we do the same thing. All of us who have children, hey, if you're really good today, you know this I'm gonna do for you, or whatever, whatever I told my kids, and I've said this before in other recordings, when they were growing up, hey, you bring me a good report card, and I promise we're going shopping. And I guess what? Until they graduated high school, every 9 weeks we were going shopping for something. So
Mm.
that was a great incentive. They did great in school. So yeah, loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I had a thought while you were talking earlier, Jonathan. I don't know if y'all saw my RCA dog moment, but
I thought you said a crick in your neck.
yeah. So I got thinking about myself growing up, and a a lot of children look at their parents, especially their dads,
Hmm.
like they can't do any wrong. Like the parents, like the dad is like the hero, right? Even in households that aren't really, let's just say, awesome, less than stellar. You know what I mean? My dad could beat up anybody. My dad, he does this. He's the greatest, and da 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 da. Da. A lot of, especially boys, look at their dads like they can do no wrong. And so if dad is tends to be on the stern side, more than stern, with those boys, or any child for that matter, the child takes it on like there's something wrong with them.
Mm.
Because in their mind, dad can do no wrong. So if he's coming down on me, it must be me, right? I'm a failure. I'm a whatever, yada, 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 that kind of thing. And as you were talking, it just kind of got me thinking a little bit that we definitely don't want our children to think that we can do no wrong. When you were kind of talking about that audit situation there,
Mm-hmm.
it really made me kind of ponder that. And no, I don't want my child to ever think that I can do no wrong. I want them to know that I am going to mess up and that there's a way back.
Mm-hmm.
That way I can be the example of how they are to live. Hey, you're going to mess up. Recognize it. Do something about it. Get back
Right.
on track.
Yeah, and stay approachable too.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So I think that's a beautiful thing, man. I'm really glad you brought that up. That made me think about something in a way and that I've never thought about it before. I mean, yes, I want to be my child's hero,
Mm,
but I also don't want them thinking that I'm infallible, you know.
right.
That's really good. Really good.
I personally enjoy my demigod, rock star, thing I have going with my kids, so I
Keep it
got
up
a
the
good thing
facade.
going here. Got a good thing going here, don't wanna mess it up, Kyle, so
Okay, so I just need
you
to
could
speak for
you could be the
myself in that.
failure if you want to, not me.
Too funny. Well, with that, why don't you take us over to Matthew 19 there, Joe?
Let's do it. All right, here we go. Honor your father and mother, and ye shall love your neighbor as yourself. That's kind of an interesting thing to kind of lump both of those in there together, you know.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this, when we're going on the topic of love, it's according to Corinthians chapter 13, love is it. Love, you can have everything else, you can have all the wisdom, you can have you could just literally anything in the world, but it says if you don't have love, you literally have nothing. And I think this is the father really driving home on these points about when we honor our parents. It's out of respect, it's out of love. So what we do is when we're doing that is we're showing respect. We're treating parents with dignity and communication and actions. Let me tell you something, that's huge. I don't know about you guys, but this is my personal pet peeve. When I hear a parent ask their child a question and the answer back is yeah, or if they get their attention and their answer back is yeah, and I don't know, that's just me. I grew up old school. I'm all about like properly. Hey, when I call your name, say yes, sir, or hey, dad, or whatever it is, whoever I'm addressing. Not like yeah, and kind of that mouth open, like yeah,
What?
and it's almost like that. Whatever. Why are you bothering me for? Anyway, so showing respect, treating parents with dignity and communication and and your actions. Your actions are huge. You could say yes, but there's two different ways to say yes. Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. Or there's like, yeah, or it's like, yes, yes, ma'am, yes, sir. Make sure I'll get whatever this is. Yes, I'll make sure it's taken care of, right? It's obeying their guidelines, adhering to the rules and advice, especially during childhood. For you young people that are listening to this, let me just say this. I know there's a certain age there where mom and dad aren't that smart to you, and you've got it all figured out. But let me just say that the advice that they're giving you is for your good.
Mm-hmm.
When they're warning you about the friends you are keeping, it's because they see something that you do not.
Right.
When whatever it might be, maybe it's that you spent the night at your friend's house a million times, and at one time they tell you no. Maybe there's a gut. Maybe they don't tell you, but maybe there's a gut feeling like, hey, I really think you should stay home tonight. Instead of doing the like, you flaring back in the chair and going all crazy and junk. You know what? Do something different and honor them and say, okay, mom, dad, and just trust that they have your best of interest. They're not just telling you no to be mean.
Mm,
Sometimes I believe that God builds into the parents this little thing in our stomach, our gut, whatever you want to call it, this intuition thing where it's like, you know what? I
Something
think
ain't
it's
right.
best you stay. Yeah, something. I think it's best you to stay home tonight. So obeying the guidelines, that's important. Expressing gratitude, acknowledging their contributions, such as raising and providing for you.
yeah.
Have you ever stopped just to go, hey, you know what? I really appreciate it. Or do you just hold your hand out going, hey, man, what about me?
Mm-hmm.
What about me, boss? That there's something to that when we express gratitude back. Well, that's honoring that verse we just read. That's honoring back to your parents.
Mhm.
And so I just want to throw it in, and then once they get older, guys, caring for them in their old age, providing support and assistance, as they age. Not like, hey, where can we send them off to so we don't have to deal with them? It's like do your best. I mean, I understand circumstances, medical, and like my father and my stepmom got to the point they needed around care. They need care 24/7, and they were in a fabulous place. They'd both gone on to be with the father, but I was so thankful that the father took them to where they were. They were cared for, and in every way possible. And that just that was awesome. But this is stuff that we need to think about. And maybe you're not a young adult person. Maybe you're not a child listening to this. Maybe you're an adult, and hey, this applies to you too. Just because you're grown up and out the house doesn't mean you're like, yeah, whatever. It's like, because that's still not, we need to honor our parents. As
Mhm.
long as, let me say this, as long as they're living and beyond them living, still honor them in the things that you do.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm glad you gave those examples. It sounds like you've maybe dealt with some of those examples before. You did that
That
really
reenactment was
well.
perfect.
Yeah.
Hey, look, man, I got 3 children and 5 grandbabies right now, so yeah.
Been there,
Yeah,
done that.
yeah, I just had some of that today when I picked one of them up from the daycare.
The
"Boy, get off
grandchildren, I'm
the
guessing, right?
ground." Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
not my kids.
Just making sure.
Yeah, yeah, I was just dealing with that today, like, "Get off the ground, man, what are you doing?" And he just
I
looks at me like, I don't know what I'm doing, Papa." "Well, get up, let's go."
I'm glad that we had this example too, because this kind of goes back to what we were talking about, what I said earlier about the instructions about how to love your neighbor as yourself. And it's starting with what goes at home. So honor your father, mother, and then you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So that really just kind of backs that up. I think that's really cool there. I want to kind of switch gears just a little bit, guys, because there's going to be the question out there, and I mean, this is something that I know that I've had a question about in the past is, well, what does a child do when you have an unrighteous parent? But let's do this first. Let's go ahead and dive into this word that's being used here. The word that's being used is honor.
Mhm.
Now, there is a setting that we're going to be talking about obedience, and we'll do that in just a minute. But the words that have been used so far is honor. And Joe, I know you've got some Hebrew in there to bring up, so I'll
Just
let
a
you do
little bit.
I'll let you do that here in just a second. But let me just share this real quick. So the word honor in its biblical context signifies profound respect, high esteem, and recognition of someone's value or worth. It goes
Mhm.
beyond mere respect and involves valuing and esteeming others, reflecting their inherent worth and dignity. So this is not blind obedience. This is the word that's being used here. I would be willing to bet, and I don't know what the Hebrew word is. Joe's going to give us that, but I'd be willing to bet that the word that's being used here is not Shema, which
Mhm.
is trust and obey or hear and do. So with that being said, Joe, what is the Hebrew in this? What's being said here?
"Yes, yes, my son, let me get to the Hebrew for you. Hold on a minute." Um, well, it's a Hebrew word for honor is kabod, Kabad, so I guess you'd say kabad or kabod. I
Okay.
know with the Jewish, language, sometimes it could be kabod, but, it means to give weight or significance to someone, suggesting a deep respect and reverence
Mm,
for one's parents. So the meaning of that word honor carries a little bit more weight. And I mean, sometimes we see honor all the time. We honor our military, we honor, all our veterans, we honor a lot of different people in this world.
mm,
And so this word it's got a little bit more weight to it in the Hebrew with the kabod. And some of these are the same things that you talked about, Kyle. It says it extends beyond mere obedience. It involves recognition of their role. So it's not just being like cordial. It's like actually recognizing the role that they. Well, I mean, serious. It's like recognizing the role, the care, appreciation, the acknowledgement of their sacrifices, honoring parents. Is it's not just some. I think some people say, "Well, I honor them because they tell me clean my room, I clean my room," and every now and then I might talk back a little bit, but I try to be respectful. And that's it's no, it's actually going a little bit more than that.
I love that, when we go through scripture, the most important thing is obviously, context is going to be there, understanding is going to be there, wisdom, Holy Spirit, knowledge, but defining words, right? And it's something we kind of get away from a lot of times. Just what does this actually mean? Because, it changes culturally, it changes in today's world. Slave means something totally different than it meant back then. And if
right.
you don't really read and understand context and know, like, most of the time it doesn't look nothing like what we saw here in America, in recent history. So when you guys are both hitting on that word honor, I think an important thing to consider, and I'm not saying this is the right answer or the wrong answer, but is find what that person, so like Joe brought up the military, obviously this is about parents, but find what is honoring to them.
Mm,
Oftentimes we say we choose what we want to honor. Well, I
Mhm.
cleaned my room, so why aren't you happy with me now? Well, yeah, but I asked you to take the dogs out and asked you to take the trash out. So yes, cleaning your room is a good thing, but that's giving yourself honor because you chose what you felt I would have received as. And I think oftentimes we forget honor has to be received. It's not, you don't just do something and then like in a
Mhm.
vacuum. You don't, you can't honor your mom in a closet, right? You have
right.
to do something. Like if you're going to honor the troops, they give them the yellow ribbon, or you can salute them, pay for their dinner, do a thing that's like, oh, this is what makes sense. That person's going to understand and receive it. Hey, thank you for your service. Everybody knows what that means. Well, if your parents say this is how I receive honor, and then you go and do it your own way, it's like being wise in your own eyes. It's keeping to man's traditions versus the traditions of your home. And the Bible's full of that stuff of what, don't do that stuff. If God says do it his way. If your parents say do it their way. Obviously that comes with some understanding and respect and logic, but I just always think it's important. Yes, we can define it, but it also is the receiver gets to somewhat have input on that definition as well. If they need a specific something, don't give them what your friend down the street's doing to their parents. They have a different household and they have different goals and expectations versus where you and your household, you're going to have different goals and expectations. Maybe your parents understand scripture different. Maybe they actually read the Bible versus the neighbor who doesn't at all. So then their
Mhm.
respect is, hey mom, I memorized John 3:16. They're going to look at you and say, what is that? Versus if your parents are believers, they're gonna be like, wow, good job. I can feel that you cared enough about what I believe that you're making it your own as well. So honor is definitely a little bit of a two-way street. And I just think it's
Yeah.
important to remember that.
Yeah, and I want to I want to bring this up, but and guys, y'all might have to chime in on this too. I don't know if you're going to have anything on this, but in this reverence that's being discussed or that's being shown in this idea of honoring, please don't hear what I'm not saying in this, and don't take this to be an over the top thing. But it seems to me like this is more of an idea that we get when walking in the court of a king or queen. The level of respect that is shown in that situation. It's not about just doing what they say.
Mhm.
It's knowing who you're in front of and honoring the position that they're in. You're showing a reverence or a respect for who they are. And I think when we look more into headship, children, mother, father, Yeshua, Most High, right? When we look at that covering that we had, that system that the Father put in place for covering, I really do think that we need to be thinking kingdom mentality in that. Not that you need to bow every time you come into the presence of your parents. That's not what I'm saying. So again, please don't hear what I'm not saying there. But it's that same idea of that kind of level of respect. Do you guys have any thoughts on that before we move on?
Oh, I for sure do. So
Okay.
like, I think at least for me, maybe my household's different than everybody else's growing up, but like, there's like a seat at the table. That's dad's seat. And
Mm,
it is just dad's seat. Like even if he's not there, you don't sit in dad's seat because that's dad's seat. And
that's
so
right.
there's already, we have a lot of this kind of baked in reverence or honor or respect that depending on how your household's run, you're gonna kind of naturally see that. Like I remember growing up, going into my parents' room was just weird. Like I was like, oh no, that's their room. Like you don't go in there for any reason. You can
Right.
walk by it, you can look in, but that's like, that's not somewhere you go in there and start playing around. You don't go jump on their bed. You're not going through their drawers or whatever. I mean, unless you were unruly, but like I wasn't going to be found in there doing anything like that. There's just
Right.
certain things that it was like, hey, this is theirs, or this is how they would expect me to act in this moment. And so, they didn't need to always say it. It was more of like that respect was earned and that position was held to a certain importance. And like I
Hmm.
said, and I think, like I said, just the dinner table chair, it's not we didn't have like the special recliner or whatever, but it's just like, here's where dad sits. It's the head of the table. Why? Because that's where dad sits.
Right.
End of the story. Right. And so there's kind of like this undertone of there's still keep that level of respect there. Like you said, I mean, I think your point, Kyle. I mean, maybe it's to the full extent of like the king and queen. That's like off with your head, but not to that level. But yeah, a lot of those ideas and concepts of like when you announce yourself when you enter the room. You like, hey. just by the way, I got home. Hey, I'm going to be home in 10 minutes. You just need to know because I'm the kid and you're the parent and I'm letting you know what's going on. Hey, can I bring so and so over to have dinner tonight? They're not, you don't just show up with stuff because
Right.
it's their house and you want to follow their rules and make them happy. So, yeah, I definitely think for sure your point's very valid.
Yeah, it's not a fear
Yeah.
like an off with your head kind of thing, but it is a similar type of fear, as in fear of the Lord kind of thing, right? We're still looking at this headship model.
Mhm.
It's respect. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Sorry.
With that, guys, I want to add this too because I think this is important. So we all know the analogy of when you throw a rock into a pond, it ripples and the ripples go out, right?
Mhm.
Hmm.
And so what we need to understand is how important this fifth commandment is for the social and spiritual implications.
Mm.
The fifth commandment underscores the importance of family within the larger social structure. This isn't just, I mean, yeah, it starts with the nucleus of the family, but the way this family interacts and the way this family loves and interacts with one another goes outside into your community, to your neighbors. If you live in a neighborhood, people see the interactions between us. Say, oh, that family over there, you ain't going over there to play anytime soon. Okay, no way. It says by promoting respect with the family unit, it helps establish stable and harmonious communities. This is important. We
Hmm.
need good families because good families are going to create good communities, right?
Mhm.
Right.
And it says, and this command is seen as a prerequisite for respecting other authorities in life. Let me tell you something. How many times have we seen a situation, let's say with a teenager, and you've thought, "Hey, man, if they don't get a hold of this kid, um, you know,
Hmm.
eh, and they're acting this way towards their parents, this means that if they ever get pulled over by a police officer, they're probably going to act that way towards that police officer, and things just may go sideways from there.
Hmm.
So you better get a hold of it now so that that situation never happens,
Yep.
Right.
right? So so young people, hear my heartness. The way that you respect your parents by honoring them, it's gonna flow over into the other people, your school teachers, the your parents. I mean, your friends' parents. It's going to overflow in every aspect of your life when if you're playing sports with your coaches. When you become old enough to go work, the way you treat your bosses and other people that you work with, this is going to overflow. This is how important it is for that family unit to be solid, is because that family unit is going out into community
Mhm.
and it's
Hmm.
going to have a profound effect on the community out there, right? And it says so. So for me, this is foundational for social order.
Yeah.
Not only within the family, but outside of that, so
It makes me think about the situations that our children are going to encounter or could encounter. I'll put it like this. If I recognize that your child is not honoring you as a parent, my child doesn't get to go off and play with you somewhere.
mhm,
You're never going to be out of my eyesight around these people if we're around them at all. If your children are not honoring you as parents, if they act the way that they do around you, there's no telling what they're going to do when you're not in sight,
Mhm.
right? And I don't want my child or children to be subjected to that, to be influenced in that way. So
yeah,
so yeah, you're absolutely right, Joe. Those ripples, they go out. But I mean, if let's say all three of us had children of similar age at this moment, and we know that our children honor us individually, and they're respectful to other children's parents,
mhm,
I think it'd be very easy decision for us to say, yeah, y'all can go down the street and go play, ride your bikes, whatever. It wouldn't be a problem. We wouldn't be worried about them getting into some kind of mischief. Not in the way that, not the bad stuff, Kids are going to be kids, they're going to play in the mud when they're not supposed to. They're going to,
right,
but it's not going to be the kind of things that we see happening in the world today. So I think that's awesome. I'm glad you brought that up, Joe. All right.
absolutely.
Well, let's dive into some of this. What do you do type situation when the parents aren't necessarily righteous. So let me pull up a few passages here. The first one I want to pull up is Colossians 3, and the what's used here is children obey. This is one of those times where we say obey rather than honor. Obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Now, that seems surface level like it's just saying, obey your parents in everything. That's not what it's saying. So let's back up. Let's look at a little context here. What this is saying is we're starting off. If you read that as a bumper sticker phrase, then yes, that's what that means. When you read that in context, we have a whole list of instructions here as to what it means to have a godly household. Before the children are mentioned, wives, submit unto your husbands as it is fitting to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. That is the standard that is to be set prior to children even existing.
It's true.
Then once that's in place and we have children, when you have parents that act this way towards one another, when they are this way, when they are doing the Father's will, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. And then it goes on to say, fathers, do not provoke your children lest they become discouraged. What are they becoming discouraged from? Obedience, godliness, holiness, righteousness, right? We don't want to discourage them from those things. That's what this is talking about here. Now let's go back. I actually want to discuss. I want to bring up we already read Ephesians 6, but let's bring it back up again. It also says, children, obey your parents. Obey your parents, and then this is the phrase, in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So we've got a few things here that is important. Fathers, you're going to bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
But if we back up and we go to this part right here in verse 1, children, obey your parents in the Lord. Obey them. But if they're telling you to do something that is not of Yah, if it's going against the Lord, that's not cool. We are to honor them, be respectful, all of those things. But when it comes to obedience, you do obey them in all things, unless what they are telling you to do is unrighteous or against God. And I got one more. We're going to go over here to Acts chapter 5 and verse 29. But Peter and the apostles answered, we must obey God rather than men. So I say all that to say this. Yes, we honor our parents. We give them the reverence. We give them the respect. We treat them in a way that's honoring their position of who they are, right? They gave us life, right? There's so many reasons to honor your parents, but when it comes to obedience, there's prerequisites in place. There's a standard of righteousness that must be in place. And if your parents are instructing you to act in an unrighteous way, we must obey God rather than man. What do you guys say about that?
Yeah, let me say this real quick. So I don't want this to be too heavy of a segment here, but we know that it's important to recognize the commandment does not negate the reality of imperfect parenting. Okay, so we know, just like you said, we got honoring and obeying. And so are parents perfect? Absolutely not. And while Yahuwah commands respect towards parents, instances of abuse or neglect complicate how this respect is rendered.
Absolutely.
In such cases, honoring your parents may involve setting healthy boundaries. And I know that's, sometimes people feel like maybe I'm stuck in a bad situation. There's nothing I can do about it. Let me tell you something. If healthy boundaries need to be set for emotional and physical safety, then do it. Those need to be the actions taken. You don't have to, if depending on your age or whatever the circumstances are, if you're in a bad situation and you're saying, well, I have to honor them, I have to do it. It's like if you're in a situation of abuse, and that can cover a lot of different things, sometimes honoring your parents, it really involves setting those healthy boundaries, and sometimes even as adults. If you have a overbearing parent who just wants to be involved in your life 24/7, and you're like, "Hey, we need some healthy boundaries here. I'm married, got 10 kids, and we're good." And so
I'm trying to
still,
leave and cleave.
right. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up, that sometimes the boundaries are a way of honoring our parents. So
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, Joe. And there's also instructions that we have throughout Scripture of how, whether it be the Levitical priesthood acting as judges, things like that, um, uh, but just governments as a whole or other men, how we are supposed to deal with people, individuals who are uh, abusive and things like that. If someone is acting unrighteously and they're acting some type of way towards anyone, let alone their children, in certain types of ways, that yes, there's instructions for how to deal with them. So it's not supposed to be on the child to have to deal with that. Like, there's ways to deal with those situations, and other men are the ones that are supposed to be doing it. So that's great that we have those instructions there too. So no one gets left out or left in the cold. Well, what about this situation? Well, yeah, there's supposed to be things in place to take care of those situations when if and when that happens. So
Great point.
thanks for bringing that up, Joe.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I that's always going to be a hard part, right? That's the imperfect side of the world. Sin
Yep.
entered the world through disobedience, and unfortunately, that carries a heavy weight all throughout history. Where we all are here on this earth because of parents, and every parent on earth has been imperfect. And the unfortunate side of that is we're still called to obey. We're still called to honor and respect and whatnot to the best of our ability, and as long as it makes logical sense. And so it gets difficult because we have a desire to honor the father, right? That word honor starts with the father.
Mm.
And he asked us, in a way to honor him is honor your parents. He says, understand the structure that I put on earth, because that structure also fits me. And so if you can start at home with your regular people that you see all day every day, that's kind of how the respect is and the honor that I want you to have for me. Is even though you don't see me every day, I'm a part of your life in a very every detail kind of way. Your breath, your blood, your everything. So it's something that's going to be difficult, but I just always want to go back to, I'm thankful that we have a perfect example to follow. And that was whenever we were talking earlier and reading through the story in Luke chapter 2, where Yeshua, the perfect example, right? Because God knew, hey, out here with humans, they're messing up and it's hard. The leadership at the time was telling them to do all kind of silliness, right? They had a million and one rules, none of them they could find in the Bible. And Jesus walked on the earth and said, hey, you know what? I'm going to not only show you the right way, I'm going to explain to you the right way, and I'm going to kind of put a cork in some of the foolishness that's going on. And so whenever he was removing some of the other stuff, what he did was he also gave us an example and said, look how I honored my mother and father. And if you read through the Gospels, who's a part of that story all the way through? His mom. She was
Mhm.
with him on all the trips. She was with him on the day of his crucifixion. Like, she never departed from the story. And even then, one of his last breathing words was, hey, John, the disciple that I love, make sure you take care of my mom, because I'm going to honor my
Right.
mom even whenever I'm not physically here. Somebody's taking care of mom. Dad has died, and I'm sad about that. So he's not here to take care of mom. Somebody will take care of my mom, because I'm going to honor my mother and father.
And we'll see you next time for the Sixth Commandment on Anchor to Truth. God bless.
Ciao.
Shalom.